First, I want to thank Jackie and Stan Fisher for hosting us this evening. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Stan. This should be a most interesting evening. Amha Sefer, which is our book group, of course, is part of the Sally and Seymour Ocean Adult Education Program here in Great Neck at the Great Neck Synagogue. We're sorry that Sally could not join us this evening, although her children are here, or I guess 3 out of 4 are here. And Sally had planned this to be on Seymour's yurt site. And I think that Seymour would have really enjoyed tonight's program because he had a very fine intellect and his investigative mind would have added a great deal to this evening's program. As many of you know, David Birnbaum first published his first book, Summa Metaphysica, 1, God and Evil, in 1986. It has now gone through its 6th edition and is required reading in a number of undergraduate and graduate programs throughout the country. The second part of this work, Summa Metaphysica 2, God and Good, was just published and is the subject of tonight's program. But for those of you who have not completed or read, or if you read it 20 years ago and have not remembered every line in it, I'm going to give you a few personal comments to review the basic postulate of God and evil. So I'm going to start off my own concept by mentioning in 1667, when John Milton, probably the most educated man in England in the 17th century, wrote Paradise Lost, which is the story, of course, of Adam and Eve, the story of the serpent, and the expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise. He wrote in his foreword that Paradise Lost was an attempt to explain the ways of God to man. And as I began reading David's book, he said the exact same sentence. And since I was writing a book on Milton, I said, this is very, very interesting and very coincidental, so I really enjoyed reading David's book. And so let me give you an idea as to what I saw in it. Certainly, David's attempt is to present a unified approach to understand God and the universe that surrounds us, as far as I can see. So as good scientists now, it is now necessary for us, for all of us, open our minds, because we are maybe coming in with a different paradigm, and that therefore requires you to look at something very objectively, and in a way put aside what you have in your past and appreciate any new data that comes in, and then you can evaluate it based on the data that you have accumulated over your lifetime and your own present philosophy. The essential question is one of theodicy. How can man explain the existence of evil? In particular, for example, David is interested in the Holocaust. When we say, Hail Melech Rachamim, God is full of mercy, goodness, righteousness, certainly he's omnipotent, certainly he should be able to control or eradicate or prevent evil from occurring in this world. So what David proposes is that all of life at creation is pure potential. Just as a baby is born with 100% potential energy, life is really truly only energy. And when energy is gone, that is the end of life. So, all that God has created in this world is born, therefore, with full potential. Now, our speaker this evening will discuss this incredible potential energy in terms of his second book. But borrowing from Kabbalah and the concept of tzimtzum, let us think of a vessel that is 100% full of water, for example. In order to fit anything else into this vessel, you are going to have to remove some of the contents of that vessel. some of that water will have to be removed. Just wait till everybody gets seats. Want to come in and sit? We got some seats up front.
I guess school, you got to teach them back.
He's sitting in the front.
We wouldn't want you anywhere else, Rabbi, but okay, so in order, therefore, to fit anything else into a vessel that's 100% full, you must remove something from that vessel. The more the water, the more the energy that comes in, the more that you want to put into the vessel, the more you must remove from that vessel. So David proposes that until the moment of creation, the universe was completely saturated with God's self, with God's energy. And if any further energy, therefore, was created in this universe, if any of it was potential energy, such as that babies we were discussing, it would have to be converted to actual or kinetic energy. Then God's energy, or God himself, so to speak, would have to allow for it by withdrawing. To add something to 100%, something must be removed. If God is 100%, God must therefore remove himself, so to speak. I think you're supposed to say Kaviyunko at this point, correct? And this is what happened. As man's role is to complete creation, man must convert potential energy into kinetic. And to do that, God must withdraw. To David, Adam and Eve really had no choice. They were created, just as we were, with a cosmic law of actualization. Call it gene directive. However you want to speak about it, Adam and Eve could not live a life in a paradise where all was provided for them. Not just man, but all the universe is governed by this same law of potential energy being created into, or converted into kinetic. To direct potential to actualize to the kinetic. So Adam and Eve, governed by this universal law, had no choice but to eat from the tree of knowledge and leave the garden, as Milton so beautifully describes it, to complete creation. And as they did, God had to recede to allow them to do that. Just as a child grows and a parent increasingly leaves their child on their own, so God must do the same. And these laws of the universe remain constant, be it on the nano level, on the ultra-microscopic level, or on the macro level. David relates the concept of God's receding to Hester Panim, to God hiding his face. God hides to allow man to mature and to understand the responsibilities of life. And when he does, we are on our own, be it good or be it evil. His concept has a very Sartre existential flavor to it. But where there is good, there is evil. And when God withdraws, evil, including the Holocaust, can occur. So the concept is certainly very intriguing and all-inclusive. Obviously, I simplified it. But let me give you an example of how it affected me. And just let's take a look at last week's Parsha, Kitesa, to give you an idea. What happens last week? This, of course, is the where we have the golden calf. But Moses tells God that he wants to know him. And he says, and now, if I have indeed found favor, Moses says, in your eyes, make your ways known to me that I may comprehend you. Well, these are tough words from Moses, telling God he wants to know him better. Rashi comments that Moses really wanted to know why the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper in this world. Indeed, Moses is asking the same question that Job asked, that Milton asked, and that David is asking. Here then, using David's concept is my interpretation. First, think how expansive it would be to learn the ways of Hashem. How many apples from the tree one would have to eat to understand so much? How much potential would be converted to kinetic? God says, I shall make all my goodness pass before you, and I shall call out with the name Hashem before you. But it comes with a cost. For God to say this, it comes with a cost to us. Because from now on, he says, I shall show favor when I choose to show favor. And God says, I shall show mercy when I choose to. So God is telling Moses up front that sometimes he will answer his people and sometimes not. Sometimes he will be there and sometimes not. I'm waiting for David to interrupt me and tell me this is not what he meant. And when God calls out the name Hashem, he has agreed to let Moses comprehend him. But what would have to happen for that to occur? Exactly what happened. God said, you will not be able to see my face, but you will see my back. So the question is, why his back? What was God doing? Was not God doing what David is suggesting? The only way to know God was for God to show his back. That is, for God to leave. To allow Moses to convert his potential to the greatest of all kinetic conversions, knowing God. And immediately upon God's receding, what does Hashem say? Hashem tells Moses, carve for yourself 2 stone tablets. No longer Hashem is no longer creating the tablets, as he did the first time. Now Hashem tells Moses, carve it for yourself. Man now must take the responsibility. That is potential converting to kinetic. And that is God showing us his back as he lets man take more control of his own destiny. So that's the first book and how I saw it. Now tonight we're very pleased to have with us Danny Khalil, who wrote the introduction and a number of beautiful elucidations of Summa Metaphysica 2. Dr. Khalil received his BS in biology at Stanford, is presently completing his combined MD PhD program as part of an NIH fellow at Cold Spring Harbor. He's doing research presently on oncology and metabolic biology of the causes of oncology, of cancer. He has his research activities is carried from the Technion in Israel, the Institute of Theoretical and Experimental Biophysics of the Russian Academy of Sciences, to Stanford, and finally to Cold Spring Harbor, where he presently is. So, without further ado, let us introduce Danny Khalil, who will tell us about the real tonight's subject.